In the heart of the old city, where shadows danced along crumbling alleyways, stood the imposing structure of Westridge Penitentiary. A relic of forgotten times, its towering walls seemed to loom over the surrounding buildings, casting a pall of dread over all who dared to glance its way. Within those grim walls, tales of horror whispered among the inmates, like the chilling gusts of wind that swept through the desolate exercise yard. The prison was a place where time itself seemed to stand still, where the condemned languished in darkness and despair. Among the convicts was Samuel Grimes, a man whose name sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened criminals. Once a respected surgeon, his fall from grace had been swift and merciless. Now he languished in his cell, haunted by the memories of his past deeds. It was on a moonless night that Samuel first heard the whispers. At first, he dismissed them as the ramblings of a troubled mind, the echoes of his own guilt. But as the nights wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to consume his very soul. It was then that Samuel began to see them, shadowy figures that lurked in the corners of his cell, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. He tried to convince himself that they were merely figments of his imagination, the product of his fractured mind. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was not alone in his cell. As the days turned into weeks, Samuel's grip on reality began to slip. He would awake in the deed of night to find himself standing at the bars of his cell, his hands slick with blood. He had no recollection of how he had come to be there, only a gnawing sense of dread that seemed to consume him from within. The other inmates whispered of curses and dark rituals, of souls condemned to wander the halls of Westridge for all eternity. They spoke of the prison's bloody history, of the countless lives that had been lost within its walls. But Samuel knew better than to believe in such tales. He was a man of science, a rational thinker who had always scoffed at superstition and myth. And yet, try as he might, he could not shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something malevolent lurked just beyond the reach of his senses. Then, one fateful night, Samuel's worst fears were realized. As he lay in his bunk, the air thick with the stench of decay, he felt a cold hand close around his throat. He tried to scream, to call out for help, but no sound escaped his lips. And as the darkness closed in around him, he knew that he was lost. When the guards found Samuel's lifeless body the next morning, they dismissed it as just another inmate lost to the horrors of Westridge Penitentiary. But those who had known him in life whispered of a different fate, of a man consumed by his own guilt and condemned to wander the halls of the prison for all eternity. And so, the legend of Samuel Grimes lived on, a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurked within us all, waiting to be unleashed upon the world. And as the years passed and the memories faded, the echoes of condemnation continued to reverberate within the walls of Westridge Penitentiary, a grim reminder of the horrors that lay buried beneath its facade. Deep within the labyrinthine corridors of Blackwood Penitentiary, there existed a wing long abandoned and forgotten. Its very existence seemed to have been erased from the annals of the prison's history, its halls shrouded in darkness and mystery. The story of the forgotten wing was whispered among the inmates like a ghostly refrain, a tale of terror that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened criminals. They spoke of inmates who had been condemned to its depths, their screams echoing through the night like the anguished cries of lost souls. Among those who dared to speak of the forgotten wing was Jacob Evans, a man whose eyes held the haunted glimmer of one who had stared into the abyss and seen his own reflection staring back. Once a petty thief, he had been sentenced to Blackwood for a crime he swore he did not commit. It was on a stormy night that Jacob first heard the whispers. As he lay in his bunk, the howling wind rattling the windows of his cell, he felt a chill creep into his bones. He tried to convince himself that it was merely the product of his overactive imagination, but deep down, he knew that something was amiss. As the days turned into weeks, Jacob became increasingly obsessed with the mystery of the forgotten wing. He would spend hours poring over the prison records, searching for any mention of its existence. But try as he might, he could find no trace of the wing or its inmates. It was then that Jacob began to experience strange occurrences within his cell. Objects would move of their own accord, shadows would flicker and dance along the walls, and he would awake in the dead of night to find himself standing at the threshold of his cell, his mind foggy and his hands stained with blood. The other inmates whispered of curses and dark rituals, of a wing haunted by the vengeful spirits of those who had been wronged by the prison's cruel regime. They spoke of strange symbols etched into the walls, of voices that whispered secrets in the dead of night. But Jacob paid them no heed. He was a man of reason, a skeptic, who scoffed at such tales of superstition and myth. And yet, try as he might, he could not shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something malevolent lurked just beyond the reach of his senses. Then, one fateful night, Jacob made a discovery that would change everything. As he searched the abandoned corridors of the forgotten wing, his footsteps echoing like a drumbeat in the silence, he stumbled upon a hidden chamber concealed behind a crumbling wall. Within that chamber, he found the truth that had eluded him for so long. The walls were lined with the names of the forgotten, their anguished pleas etched into the stone for all eternity. And at the center of the chamber stood a solitary figure, its eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. Jacob tried to flee, to escape the clutches of the entity that lurked within the shadows. But it was too late. The darkness closed in around him, swallowing him whole, and he knew that he was lost. When the guards found Jacob's lifeless body the next morning, they dismissed it as just another inmate lost to the horrors of Blackwood Penitentiary. But those who had known him whispered of a different fate, of a man consumed by his own obsession and condemned to wander the halls of the forgotten wing for all eternity. And so, the legend of Jacob Evans lived on, a cautionary tale of the dangers of delving too deep into the darkness that lurked within the human soul. And as the years passed and the memories faded, the forgotten wing remained shrouded in mystery, a grim reminder of the horrors that lay buried beneath the surface of Blackwood Penitentiary. In the heart of the sprawling metropolis stood the formidable structure of Stonegate Penitentiary, a monolith of despair that loomed over the city like a dark omen. Within its grim confines, the echoes of anguish reverberated through the cold, damp corridors, and the weight of despair hung heavy in the air. At the center of Stonegate lay the infamous solitary wing, a place of darkness and isolation, where the most hardened criminals were sent to languish in solitude. Its very existence was a testament to the cruelty of the prison system, a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity could sink. Among the inmates condemned to the solitary wing was Emily Carter, a woman whose name sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned guards. Once a notorious serial killer, her crimes had shocked the nation and earned her a one-way ticket to the darkest corner of Stonegate. It was on a moonless night that Emily first heard the whispers. As she lay in her cramped cell, the silence broken only by the distant sound of dripping water, she felt a chill creep into her bones. She tried to convince herself that it was merely her imagination running wild, but deep down, she knew that something was amiss. As the days turned into weeks, Emily became increasingly consumed by the mystery of the whispers. She would spend hours pacing her cell, her mind racing with thoughts of escape and revenge. But try as she might, she could find no solace in the darkness that surrounded her. The other inmates spoke of curses and hauntings, of restless spirits doomed to wander the halls of Stonegate for all eternity. They spoke of the ghost of a former inmate who had died under mysterious circumstances, his screams echoing through the night like a siren's call. But Emily paid them no heed. She was a woman of reason, a skeptic who scoffed at such tales of superstition and myth, and yet, try as she might, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched, that something malevolent lurked just beyond the reach of her senses. Then, one fateful night, Emily made a discovery that would change everything. As she searched the dimly lit corridors of the solitary wing, her footsteps echoing like a heartbeat in the silence, she stumbled upon a hidden passage concealed behind a crumbling wall. Within that passage, she found the truth that had eluded her for so long. The walls were lined with the names of the forgotten, their anguished pleas etched into the stone for all eternity. And at the end of the passage, stood a solitary figure, its eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. Emily tried to flee, to escape the clutches of the entity that lurked within the shadows. But it was too late. The darkness closed in around her, swallowing her whole, and she knew that she was lost. When the guards found Emily's lifeless body the next morning, they dismissed it as just another inmate lost to the horrors of Stonegate Penitentiary. But those who had known her whispered of a different fate, of a woman consumed by her own demons and condemned to wander the halls of the solitary wing for all eternity. And so, the legend of Emily Carter lived on, a cautionary tale of the dangers of delving too deep into the darkness that lurked within the human soul. And as the years passed and the memories faded, the solitary wing remained shrouded in mystery, a grim reminder of the horrors that lay buried beneath the surface of Stonegate Penitentiary.